I'm assuming that most of you in this session, in this workshop, most of you are master students who are doing mode C or mode B, I hope. But usually from my experience, there would also be PhD students and other mode students, but I'm not sure. But I hope that in this session, most of you are doing mode C master's program, yeah, hopefully. But anyway, if there are students in this session who are doing something else but want to join this session to understand about how to write, it's okay. Just let me know what stage of study you are in. Okay. Now, before we go further into you know, the workshop on how to write a project paper, I would like to talk about these two documents. Yeah, one is this descriptor. The other one is the guideline. So basically, what I'm trying to share with you is a guideline that is available on IPS website. So if you have not seen this before, please go to the IPS website and download this material, yeah, this guideline, because this guideline is very clear, it's very detailed, explaining on how to write a dissertation or a thesis. Now, why is this also a good for those who are writing a project paper? Because the guideline is so detailed, it helps you in preparing the format of your writing, the pagination, you know, spacing, and what should be included in the chapters and whatnot. So this is a very good guideline that you should refer to. So if you have not seen this before, please go to the IPS website and download this document. All right. Now, let's have a look at this this document. Yeah? So in this document, you will have some very important information about the requirement of submitting your paper. In this case, we are talking about project paper, yeah, and some of the regulations that you will have to follow. Even it doesn't matter whether you are doing a research for mode A or mode B, or even a project paper. It doesn't matter, because the rules will have to be applied quite similarly. Okay, you know, it's just the project itself is different, but rules are always the same, right? And in general, this would be how your project paper would be arranged. Usually, we will have this 5 chapters. I'm talking about conventional project paper, yeah. But we will go into detail after this. But just want to give you some general background of you know, writing your thesis or your project paper. Yeah? So this is what you will get in your in this document. Okay. Very detailed explanation of what should be things that should be included in your research paper, in your project paper, right? So you have all this, and then you'll have the section where it talks about the format. Okay, this document will help you to understand the formatting of your project paper, right? what you should have in your thesis or project paper. So follow this as your guideline, right? And some detailed explanation. Okay. And then you have the technical specification of how to write or how to prepare your project, whether your paper, whether it's a project, dissertation, thesis, and whatnot. Okay, so this is, like I said, let me repeat, this is a very important document. And if you have not seen this before, you have not have a copy of this, please make sure that you go and download from the IPS website. Okay, so make sure everybody has a copy of this. And usually after the workshop, I usually just share this document with everyone. Just in case there are still students who do not have this document. Okay, so that's the first document that I would like to share. I hope everybody is able to see the document when I was scrolling it. Right. So the second document that I would like to share with all of you is the descriptor. Right. The descriptor is also important to understand so that you know the difference between what you are preparing and what other people are preparing. Okay. For example, if you look at this descriptor, it explains to you what need to be prepared for which level of work that you're doing. For example, if you're doing a PhD, your word count for the thesis should be about 100,000 words. If you're doing MOHD master research, the word count for your thesis should be not more than 60,000 words. If you're doing MOHD thesis, then your mixed mode, thesis, then your word count should be not more than 40,000 words. And if you're doing mode C, which what we are going to talk about today, the word count of your project paper should not be more than 20,000 words, right? So in terms of word count, so you need to understand the differences in terms of word count. And also, let's now focus on project paper. If you're doing a Mode C project paper, you will of course be your project will be evaluated by two people, two examiners from within the university or from within the faculty, right? And usually if what we have done so far for project paper, I think we have a system where we differentiate in terms of the percentage of marks that can be given by the examiner and the supervisor. So you will have certain percentage of marks given by your supervisor and your examiner. But the point is, it will only involve internal examiners and you do not have to go for Viva. So that's the first thing that you need to understand. Secondly, you must have completed uh, your your courses, yeah, before you can do you can submit your or start doing your project paper, because there is a prerequisite for before you write your project, which is you must have completed certain number of credit uh, hours. So this is also something that you need to check and make sure, yeah, to make sure that that you are able to follow this regulation. And the the credit value of your project paper is usually very small. For MOHD, it's between 6 and 8 credit for the project. So this is also very important to understand, so that you do not over prepare your project paper. Okay, you're not doing something that is way above the credit hours that are given to you. Okay, so if your credit hours is for that project is only 8, so do something that is worth 8 credit hours, not 44 credit hours. So that one you have to understand. Not only you, but also your supervisor needs some time to be reminded. Sometimes supervisor also need to be reminded about this, that you are doing MOHD project paper. The credit value is only 6 or 8, so the effort should be equivalent to 6 or 8 credit hours. Okay, both students and the lecturers must understand this. So if your lecturers or your supervisors ask you to do something that is way beyond project papers value or credit value, please let them know that you are doing project paper. I know this sounds a bit strange, but that's the reality. Okay, you have to tell your project. Your supervisor that you're in MOHD. Well, sometimes, like me, if I have too many students, sometimes I forget that this student is actually doing MOHD, this student is doing MOHD, this is doing MOHD A. So sometimes they need to be reminded. Okay. Is there any need for proposal presentation for MOHD students? Now, in general, there is no need for you to defend your proposal, like what students in PhD or EDD or Mod A, Mod B are doing. Okay, so usually, in principle, students who are doing Mod C, a project paper, are not required to present their proposal. However, um, depending on your supervisor and also your faculty, sometimes students who are doing MOHD project paper may also be asked to defend their proposal. For example, I know that there are a few faculties, including FPE, my faculty, where we organize colloquium session, where our MOHD students also present very brief proposal in that session. And the reason why many faculties are asking even MOHD students to defend, we call it, well, sort of like a proposal defense session. The reason why we are doing this is so that, number one, we can actually understand what the student wants to do, and number two, so that we can help the students to prepare a better project paper, right? So, so whether there is a need for a proposal or not will depend on your faculty and also your supervisors. So if there are supervisors or faculties that ask you to present your proposal, even though you are doing MOHD, this is not strange. We are doing it. Like I said, many faculties are doing it now. So because we find that this is a better way for us to help our students prepare the project better. All right. Now let's go to the um, the detail in terms of the content of the project paper. Now, first of all, we need to understand that when we talk about project paper, well, our understanding is that our understanding is that conventionally we understand that project paper refers to a research, a mini research. Okay, that is what our understanding is all about when we talk about project paper. So that's why when students who are doing a MOHD, when it comes to project paper, you can see that they would prepare a research actually. Okay, they would prepare a research, a simple research, and therefore that's why we are looking at this format and this structure when we're discussing how to write a project paper. But actually, there are many kinds of a project that you can write which fall under project paper. For example, of course, before you can decide which type of work you want to do for your project paper, you will have to discuss with your supervisor, and the supervisor must agree with you or come to a consensus on what kind of project paper you want to prepare. But there are many kinds of project paper that you can do, yeah, or many kinds of projects you can do for MOHD. For example, it can be just a literature review. Okay, it can be library research. Okay, it can be action research. It can be experimental research. It can be comparative research. Right? It can be content analysis research. It can be case study, and it can also be an SLR research, systematic literature review research. So there are many kinds of a project that you can undertake for your MOHD research or project paper. Yeah. So, like I said, you need to, of course, you need to discuss with your supervisor first, and both you and your supervisor will have to, agree on or come to a consensus on this. Okay, before you can choose which one you want to do. Right. So going back to our discussion on how to prepare a project paper, and we are talking about a conventional project paper, which is research-based. Yeah. So, for example, if that is the case, if we are doing a research-based project, then of course you will have those 5 chapters that we talked about just now. And in each chapter, you will have certain components that you must include. Yeah. Remember, I said look at your the guideline of writing a thesis. You will get some information from that format on how to prepare um, your thesis, your project paper. Okay, but we are assuming that we are writing project paper based on research. Yeah, so those are the things that we'll have to put in our chapter 1. We are going into a bit more detail after this. I just want to go through in general, yeah, and compare it with PhD mode A, mode B, so that you understand in general what we need to prepare for the project. Okay, so you will have your chapter 1, which is the introduction. All right, and then in the next chapter, which is chapter 2, you will have your literature review. But just as a rule of thumb, if you're doing project paper, just a rule of thumb, not necessarily you need to follow this very strictly, but just a rule of thumb. Usually, the content or the length of your chapter 2 or literature review should be about 15% of the whole of your project. But again, let me repeat again, this is just a guideline, a rule of thumb. Doesn't mean that when you write your project paper, you will count and make sure that it's 15%. No, yeah. Jangan pula nanti orang student kata atau Dr. Asri kata 15%. This is hanyalah panduan umum. Yeah? This is just a guideline. So it could be more, it could be less, but our suggestion is it's around 15% of the whole of your thesis should come under literature review. Okay? Right. And what kind of materials you should include in your literature review in chapter 2? It should be, again, this is suggestion. It should be article, journal, and proceedings. 60% of it should be article, journals, and proceeding. Another 40% would come from books, electronic materials, theses, and so on and so forth. Okay, but again, this is rule of thumb. This is just a guideline. Doesn't mean that you have to strictly, religiously stick to this 60%, 40%. Yeah. It may change depending on what you're writing. Okay. And of course, you shouldn't be using materials that are not you will not be able to ascertain its authenticity. Okay. Materials that you don't know who has prepared, or materials you don't know who has written. So it could be materials that is based on somebody's opinion, especially now during election season. A lot of people will give their opinion about many things, including education system. You have to be careful on using these materials, because materials that you will not be able to prove is going to be discarded. Actually, you cannot use this kind of material. And most of the time, these materials come from blogs, come from Wikipedia, come from forums and other online materials. Unless they are official materials published online, official materials published online by official website, for example, and then it's fine. All right. But other than that, please do not use them, because you will not be able to determine its authenticity. Wikipedia is not accepted because Wikipedia is an open document. You can go to Wikipedia now and edit something in the Wikipedia. Okay, so anybody can write in the Wikipedia. So that's why we do not accept materials from Wikipedia. You can use Wikipedia as your own reference to get something, and then through Wikipedia sometimes you read about certain things. Oh, okay, this is what the history is all about. But you will go to the main source to get the materials. That is allowed. Yeah. Right. Let me see. I think there's some question here. Yeah, right. I'm about to come to that actually, regarding okay, regarding how old can the material be when you want to use materials for your project paper. Yes, there is a rule saying that materials that you need to use, that you're allowed to use for your research and also project paper, should be at least 5 years old or latest. Okay. It should be more than 5 years old because that would be considered outdated. But it did, again, this is rule of thumb. Yeah, 5 years or later, meaning 5 years, 4 years, 3 years, 2 years, 1 year, yesterday. Yeah, we can accept that. But more than 5 years, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Sometimes your supervisor will advise you to look for something else. Now, however, it doesn't mean that you can never use materials which are older than 5 years. Okay, you can. It doesn't mean that you cannot use them at all. You can. For example, materials that are regarded as the main reference because that is the original material that was produced regarding certain theory, certain model, certain whatever that you're using. Yeah. For example, if you're going back to the origin of Maslow theory, for example, of course you have to go back to the original reference, which is very old. All right, so you can use that. No issue. You can use that, no problem. So that's why usually in our literature review section, in our chapter 2, you will have two kinds of materials actually. One is the main source of reference. For example, the example that I gave just now, Maslow theory, for example. So you will have the main source, maybe one book or two book or articles that was originally created to explain on the theory itself, right? You may have that one or two, which is, of course, more than 5 years old. But then the second kind of materials that you will have would be newer articles, materials that, number one, perhaps re-explain about the model or the theories that you are using because they did some analysis, they did some critique, for example. Okay. Number two, it could be materials, later materials that refer to the application of the model. The application of the model in various various research. So these are what we are referring to when we talk about materials that should be at least 5 years old, not more than 5 years old. This is the kind of reference that we are talking about. References that refer to the application of the models, of the theories in research. Yeah, and actually it's quite easy to get. If you're familiar with Google Scholar and many other electronic journals website, you will see that you can actually look for these newer materials. For example, you can go to this website. Maybe later I'll show you. You have got one article, okay, and then you look at the section where you can click cited by. By going to the list of citation, who have cited the work, then you'll be able to see newer articles, newer work related to the subject, to the topic of the research that you are looking for. Right, so there are many ways of how you can get newer materials regarding a particular research. Okay, so I think I have answered your question, Azwani, regarding how old will be the materials that we can use. Yeah. So the rule of thumb says 5 years or later. Let me see. I think I saw somebody else. Nick Nazlan. Salam Prof. Can you please explain on writing approach about researcher voice and not reporting about the past research by giving an example? Okay. How do you know about this? I haven't talked about this yet. Researcher voice. Right. Now, of course, when you're writing, when you're in chapter 2, especially if you're doing PhD and Mode A, yeah? Especially PhD, EDD, Mode A and Mode B, especially when you write your chapter 2 literature review, we would like you not to just report past research. For example, when we say reporting past research, is like this, yeah. In chapter 2, you write about, and I just read to you some example like this. Author A wrote. Author A said that research. Author A said that this his research found that this has happened. Blah 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 blah. You report. Okay, you report what author A says. Then you go to author B. Author B 2021 said that this research, just report the finding. Okay, author B 2021 said that blah 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 blah. And then you go to author C. Author C 2005 reported that 25% of students who committed suicide from the urban family. Author D 2018 reported that female students contributes to the highest number of students who committed suicide, blah, blah, blah. Okay, finish. Right? Then you go to the next paragraph and talk about something else. Using the same method. And then finish. You go to the next paragraph and, report the same thing. So this is what we call reporting past studies. Okay? Yeah, just reporting past studies. You're just describing what past studies have found. That's it. But there is no researcher voice, your voice. Meaning, there is no analysis. Researcher voice here means analysis. Okay, you have listed what has been found by author A, author B, author C, author D, author E. Fine. But our next question to you would be, so what? So what? Meaning, so you are listing this. What does it mean? Are you telling me that there is a pattern? Are you telling me that there is a development from 50 years ago? There is a change in terms of how suicidal action, took place, developed. What is it? What are you listing? What are you sharing with us? That is what we mean by a researcher's voice, Nick, and also the rest. Yeah. So we need you to, instead of just describe, or report what other researchers have said, we want you to be critical. That's all. That's what we mean by researcher's voice. We want you to be critical. Okay, critical in the sense that, okay, I have read 35 articles on youth suicide. I've read 35 articles. Major articles, not articles by unknown people. I've read 35 articles by major authors, meaning people who are experts in this area. But I'm simply sharing with you what they found. So that is not enough, actually. Sharing with us what they have found is one thing, but we want to know, so what do you see from this? So your researcher's voice could be in the form of observation of all the findings. Okay, so you notice that there is actually a change in trend, for example, from the last 10 years. There is a change in trend. You see, this is not what you claim. Okay, this is not what you claim. Some people misunderstood this part by thinking that, how can I'm doing this research, how can I claim? This is not your claim. This is evidence from the findings of the past researchers. Okay? So, the past studies have shown this. If you look at the studies, then you will be able to see the pattern, for example, the pattern that before this, studies only focus on this part. And, based on your description or your literature review, which you have put description into your chapter 2, based on that, you can see there is an evidence of changing of trend. So it's not a claim by you. It is evidence from the research or literature review. Okay? I hope everybody can understand this. When we say researchers' voice here, it's not like you giving your voice unnecessarily. You're claiming something unnecessary. No. It's your analysis of the literature review. What do you see? What does the finding give you, or teach you, or show you, which you would like to tell us? Okay, so I hope you're clear about what it means by literature review should not be merely reporting of findings of past research. It should also be when you're writing about this, you should also be a bit, for MOHD students, you're doing project paper, MOHD students, we are not expecting you to, because remember, it's less than 20,000 words. Yeah, it's 6 to 8 credit hours only. So do work that is worthy of that kind of a credit value. Yeah, but we expect you to also be a bit critical when you're writing your chapter 2. Okay, all right. And of course, when you're preparing your chapter 2, you should be focusing only on the topic that you are researching on. This is another problem with chapter 2, because sometimes students like to include almost everything in their chapter 2. Yeah, they put almost everything in the chapter 2. But you don't have enough space and time to discuss about everything in chapter 2. Okay, so basically you should be focusing on the topic that you are going to research on in your chapter 2, rather than talking about almost everything, right? So if you're doing leadership, for example, you can't be writing about everything under leadership, right? You have to be, you may have some general discussion on leadership, very briefly, because you want to introduce the topic leadership, but then you will focus on, let's say your topic is on, your research is on transformational leadership. So you'll be focusing on that transformational leadership. And if you're talking, if your research is focusing on not only transformational leadership, but also transformational leadership in the second in the primary school, for example, you'll be focusing on that. So try to avoid in chapter 2 especially, try to avoid putting everything in chapter 2, collecting all the literature and put it in chapter 2. Please avoid that. Try to be more focused in including what you want to include in your chapter 2. Right, Sujana asked me a question here. Good afternoon, Doctor. The ref articles that need to be within 5 years only applicable for literature review or for all other subtopics? It's for all, actually. It's for all, yeah? It's not only for literature review, it's actually for all throughout the project, throughout the thesis. But again, like I said, Sujana, you give me an example here. For instance, can I use a 2015's ref for problem statement or research background? Again, like I said, the rule of thumb says that it should be 5 years or less. Can we use 2015's work or reference in our thesis? Yes, we can, provided that it is relevant. Okay, provided that it is relevant. Of course, when you use something like this, 2015, let's say, your supervisor might be okay with it. Some supervisor may say, go and find something new. That is very common. Okay, that is very common. But again, it all goes back to whether they are relevant or not. Now, my concern is, for example, if you're talking about research problem statement, let's say, usually in the problem statement section, we would like to see something that is more current. Yeah, something that is more current, because we don't want to discuss, or we don't want to research on old problems, issues that have been dealt with by other people because it's been there for 20 years. So that's why usually we would suggest that if you're, especially if you're preparing your problem statement session, your research background section, we would encourage our students to support this with references that are more up to date, because then it will give more value to the problem statement section or the research background section, because we can see that this is a very a pressing matter. It is a very current issue that has to be negotiated, that has to be addressed, right? But again, Sujana, let me repeat, it doesn't mean that you cannot use at all. I'm giving you a general view, okay? Because I can only give you, a more correct response once I have read, for example, your introduction, your research background, and your research or problem statement, to understand whether it is relevant or not. Okay. So, but in general, we don't encourage, because we would like you to look at something that is more current. Okay. So the rest is more like different ways of writing a chapter 2, how you should decide on how to organize or to structure the chapter 2. Okay, it depends. Yeah, sometimes you want to structure it chronologically, meaning from oldest to newest, or you want to organize it according to themes. For example, you can also do that. So this one is up to you and up to the appropriateness of preparing or structuring a chapter 2. On how you want to organize chapter 2. Next, let's look at the next section. So the next section would be the next chapter would be chapter 3. Of course, in chapter 3, you will have the research methodology section, where you can, this is where you talk about your research method. Of course, there are two main way of writing it. If you're doing quantitative, then there's a way of writing it. If you're doing qualitative, there is a way of writing it as well. But of course, again, there would be a very general rule of thumb on how you can prepare your chapter 3, which we will look at a bit more for later in my slides. But you will have, in general, you will have the introduction to chapter 3, and then you will have the research design, and then you will have the population and sampling, the instrumentation, the pilot, data collection method, this data analysis, and so on and so forth. So that's a standard content that you need to have in chapter 3. Yeah. Once you're done with chapter 3, conventionally you will have chapter 4, where you will report your findings. This is where you do your data analysis, and usually we will look at whether the data analysis has been done correctly, and whether it is aligned with what you want to, with what you have claimed in your chapter 3 and what you want to do in chapter 1. And we go through all the materials that you have put in chapter 4 in terms of this, findings of your research. If you're doing qualitative, of course, if you're doing MOHD, not many students do qualitative, yeah, when they do MOHD. But if you're doing MOHD and you're doing and you're using qualitative, well, we don't expect you to do a very detailed or in-depth qualitative analysis. You can use some very basic manual qualitative analysis. That will be fine with us. But of course, the process has to be there. Qualitative analysis process has to be there, but the depth of and the detail of that analysis would vary, of course. But for MOHD, we do not expect you to do, to use NVivo to and other kinds of qualitative data analysis software. We like I said, it's a project paper worth 6 or 8 credit hours. So we don't expect you to do that kind of detailed analysis for qualitative, for example. Yeah. So that's why even if you're doing quantitative research for MOHD, I wouldn't encourage my students to do, I don't know, PLS. I don't. In fact, for my students, to the extent that I don't allow, it's like it's a waste of time and energy, because you're just doing a project paper which carries 6 or 8 credits only, and you're doing all those sorts of analysis. To me, is a waste of time and energy. Although there are people who insist they want to do it, and the choice is theirs. So if I have a student who insists that he or she wants to do that, then I would give them very strict advice. But in the end, I will let them choose. If they still want to carry on, it's up to them, no problem. But yeah, I don't think that it is necessary for you to do those kind of things. Yeah, despite whatever you may think, whatever your supervisor may say, despite all of that, please understand that this is project paper, MOHD project paper, which carries 6 to 8 credit hours. That's the point. Okay, and then you will have chapter 5, where you have a discussion of all the findings, this is where we look at whether you are able to discuss all the materials or the findings that you have put in your chapter 4, and whether you are able to support all your discussion with literature or past research, and so on and so forth. Okay, so that's the general overview of how you can prepare your basically, yeah, this is just basically what research project is all about. For you to understand. Right, let me look at the materials that I want to share with you. I'm using this material because, well, it's useful, even though the topic is about writing a proposal, but basically it's the same thing. I want to share with you in greater detail on what you need to include in your chapter one, and how we can write a better chapter one. This will also include on the materials that you need to put in your various sections of chapter one. Okay, so so basically in chapter one of your project paper, these are the things that you will need to have. Again, depending on the research design itself. So you must have the introduction and the background of the study, and then you have the problem statement. Then you'll have the research objectives, research questions, research hypothesis, if there are any, significance of the research, scope and limitation of the research framework, which will comprise of the theoretical and conceptual frameworks, if there is any, and the operational definitions plus the summary. Usually we call it summary of chapter. Right. Now, usually when we write our introduction or background of the research section in chapter one, this is where we want to introduce our topic of research. If I put it on slideshow, can you see?
Yes, can.
Okay, good. All right. Right. So in this section in chapter one, this is where we generally introduce the topic of our research. Now, this goes back to a question that was asked just now. I think I can't remember who, Azwani or somebody else. But the point is this: in your introduction section, this is where you may want to remember. You want to give a general introduction to your topic, to the topic of your research. So here you may start by giving, the historical aspect, the historical aspect of your of the topic. If again, if that is necessary. Okay, if that is necessary. Remember that the thing is, you want to start with something general because you want people to first get a feel of understanding of what the topic is all about, right? Before you dive into specifically what the topic is. So you start, for example, again, I'll go back to the topic of leadership, instructional leadership just now. So you may start with, what is leadership? You may start with, what is leadership? Before you, well, your research is specifically on instructional leadership, fine. Okay, but you can start with a very brief introduction to what is leadership. So this is what it means. Introduction or background of the research, where you start by describing the historical aspect of the research or the topic before you go to the specific issue of the research. Yeah. So you may start with that, the historical aspect or the natural aspect of the topic. So again, like in the case of instructional leadership just now, you may start with general view, very short, very brief, general introduction to leadership, and then you start zooming into instructional leadership, why it is important, and so on and so forth, without actually discussing the problem yet. Okay, without actually discussing the problem yet, you're giving an overview of what it is. Okay, so here, this is where when you're writing your project paper in chapter one, this is where you start trying to provide some foundation about the problem that you want to study. Okay, so remember, this is where you actually give an introduction to the research that you want to do. Now, when you do this, what you're trying to do is actually you want to provide people who is going to read your research with some very critical information about the topic. That's why I said, for example, you go back historically, because you want people to understand the topic that you want to study. And by providing this understanding of the topic that they are studying, then they will be able to see later. They will be able to see why it is so important to study and why it is so important to solve the problem that has been highlighted by the researcher. Okay. Right, so that's why background of the study is very important. Okay, in chapter 1. Now, then you move to the research problem or problem statement. Now, the research problem is where you actually talk about the problem that you are trying to solve. The problem that you are trying to solve in your research. What is actually the problem that you want to research by doing this particular research? I'm sure you must have experienced comments from your supervisors who say, when you have sent your materials, your supervisor asks you, what is your problem? What is your research problem? What is your problem statement? I cannot see the problem that you want to do, the research. And your supervisor asks you to rewrite. It's still not clear. It's still not clear. Don't get angry. Don't get mad with your supervisor. They're trying to help you, because if you are not, if the supervisor or your lecturer cannot see or cannot understand what the problem is, then you are going to have a big problem. Because nobody understands what you're trying to solve, or because people don't see that there is a problem, right? So you must make sure that your research problem is clearly defined in chapter 1, so that people can see what you're trying to do. Okay, so how do you construct your research problem in chapter 1 when you're writing your project paper? Of course, you will need to of course, choose the field of study, which you already have actually chosen, field of study. And then you will have to, of course, do a lot of reading. You'll have to do a lot of literature review to understand the theories, of the field of the study. And then you start limiting the scope of the study, because you want to make sure that what you want to study is something that can be covered. It's not too huge. The area is not too big that you won't be able to cover everything. So you have to limit the scope of your study. Then you start to evaluate what the research problems are, and then you develop your research problem statement, the statement itself. Now, the problem with research problem is a lot of students ask, where can I get? What could be the sources of my research problem? Well, there are a lot. There are a lot. The sources of research problem can come from so many places. your personal experience, your intuition. Your intuition is like gerak hati, guts feeling. Your practical experience, your brainstorming. You talk with other people, and triggers and give you some ideas. Critical literature review, discussion with experts, folklore. So hikayat, cerita-cerita, past studies, exposure to situations in the field, current theory, social issues, and so on and so forth. But don't get me wrong, these are sources of your research problem, meaning this could trigger you to do research on something, trigger you. But of course, you cannot only use intuition. Okay, you cannot just use intuition, gerak hati, or gut feeling as the main source of your research problem. Cannot. It can be a trigger. It can be something that sparked you to do the research. Yes, no problem. So let's say your intuition or your gut feeling say that certain group of students are more prone to be involved in suicidal activities. Let's say, okay, that is your gut feeling, your intuition. So that would trigger you to do the research, but that alone cannot be used in writing your problem statement. Okay, it triggers you. So the next step that you have to do is you go and do your research, your literature review, look at theories, look at past research, and so on and so forth to gather information and to see what's the gap. So again, don't get this wrong. Sources of research problem here means that what can trigger you to do your research. Yeah, if you're talking about personal experience, let's say you drive to work every day, and you, based on your personal experience, you see certain things on the road. Okay, I don't know. People like to break, based on your personal experience, you see that people like to break traffic rules or traffic regulations when they are in a hurry. For example, I'm sorry, I don't out of on top of my head. That is your personal experience. You see this every day. So that can trigger you to do a research, but that alone cannot be put in your problem statement. So that will trigger you to do some research, literature review, past studies, read a lot. Okay, so I hope you can understand what I'm trying to say. Your guts feeling, your personal experience, your discussion with friends, and brainstorming, stories that you hear, they are all sources of research problem, but they can be used as a trigger or a sparking point for you to go and do proper review to establish the research problem. Okay, so those are sources of research problem that you can use, right? But again, you have to also understand that when you are talking about doing research, the research problem uh, um, must have certain criteria. For example, the research problem should be something that is significant to the field, not something that people uh, have been doing and there's nothing new coming out. For example, if students come to me and talk about they want to do research on leadership, I'll tell them no. I said I would tell them that there are too many studies on leadership, so it has become insignificant to the field. because that's just too much. But if, let's say, students say, okay, I want to do research on teacher leadership, the concept of teacher leadership in Malaysia, in secondary school in Malaysia, for example. That would be something that I would encourage. Why? Because it is very significant in the field, because there's not many research done on that, and the concept of teacher leadership is still new in the field in Malaysia, for example. So there are certain criteria that you have to look at when you want to come up with your research problem. Yeah, it has to be significant to the field. It must be original. Original here doesn't mean that you are the first person who come up with the idea. No, there is no such thing as original in that sense, right? Original meaning it has something to do with the context. Okay, the context, for example, context of your locality, context of your workplace, context of a lot of context that makes it become original. Okay? A study may have been done in various places, but maybe it has not been done on orang asli, for example, so it becomes original. But don't worry so much about this originality. Make sure that the research problem is something that is relevant and significant in the field. That would be good enough. Of course, the research can be implemented or can be researched. Please don't come up with something that is not researchable, that is something that cannot be implemented. Remember, especially I'm addressing students who are doing a MOHD project paper. Do research that is worth 6 or 8 credit hours, not something that is beyond that. So something that can be implemented, something that can be solved within that period of time. If you need to do a research and the research is something to do with election now, for example, and you have to go and interview the Prime Minister, it is something that cannot be implemented. So don't do that. Don't do that kind of research. So that kind of research problem should be thrown out of the window. Okay. The research problem is something that is current. So that's why it goes back to what somebody asked me just now about using a material or a research material that is quite old when you're discussing your research problem. The worry is that if you're using something that is quite old, then your research problem may not be that current, that up to date. Yeah. So try to make sure that your research problem is a current one and an interesting research. Azwani asks another question: how to constrain ourselves from over explaining, Doctor? Sometimes we tend to overdo in explaining. Okay, I don't know whether this is a question or whether this is referring to my explanation. But
because I seems like my chapter 1 is sometimes I overdo my chapter 1 sampai terlebih daripada literature review. So actually we are trying to macam nak segregate between literature review and chapter 1, which one is supposed to be the priority. Sometimes kita tend to overdo chapter 1 sometimes. At my stage, I overdo chapter 1 sebenarnya.
I think, yeah, it's true actually. Not only in chapter 1, sometimes in every chapter. We try to unintentionally, I would say, we overdo our explanation. Well, I think the advice on limiting the focus would be useful here if we want to answer the question of how do we constrain ourselves from over explaining or overdoing our explanation or our deliberation or our description of something. I think there has to be a limit of the focus. I think that will help. I remember when my own experience when writing, sometimes it becomes too long, and long is one thing, and long and winding is another thing. You sort of you're beating around the bush. You know, you're writing in circle. So that's really not good. But it happens sometimes. But I noticed that if we focus, we limit our focus on what we want to talk about, that would somehow help us to you know, to reduce our uh, possibility of over explaining ourselves. So limit on the focus of our discussion. So if we have, for example, you want to talk about the history of leadership, let's say. So once we have achieved that goal, then we just stop. You know, we don't have to go further. So limit ourselves on the focus of our discussion. What do we want to explain? We want to explain about the history. You know, we tell ourselves that okay, I just want to discuss on the history of leadership from this period to this period, for example. So we limit ourselves to that. That's it. Finish. We stop. Okay. So that could be one of the ways to reduce from overdoing our explanation. All right. Now, going back to identifying the research problem, what we can do is something like this. Yeah. This is going back to this is going back to where is it? To this just now when we talk about constructing the research problem. I'm sharing with you an example of how we can narrow the focus of our problem statement. It is a time-consuming process. It is not simple, and it is quite challenging actually. But well, you have to do it. So the example here that I usually use, well, I use education management because that's my area. So for example, the process of narrowing down from a broad field of study, you know, for a broad topic to something that is more focused, would be something like this. The broad area or the broad field is education management. Within education management, you have many other aspects. So you narrow down to student management, for example. Within student management, there are so many aspects. You narrow it down to disciplinary problems. And of course, within the disciplinary problems, there are so many other issues. And you're talking about the increase of bullying cases in urban schools. So I know this looks like, it looks simplistic, it looks simple, but I just want to share with you the process of how it can be done. It's not as simple as this, but there is a process. So increase of bullying cases in urban schools, and then you focus to, I want to find out the factors. Okay, what are the factors that cause the increase of bullying cases in urban schools? So that would be how we can um, um, define our topic. You know, when we want to identify our research problem. So uh, how do we prepare or how do we write problem statements? So like I said, we start by introducing the topic, the background of the topic in general. Okay. And then we start looking at literature review to identify the existence of the problem. We want to prove that there is such a problem by looking at literature review. Okay. Um, um, and then we look at what past research has been had, what kind of past research that have been carried out, what kind of solutions that have been found. Okay. Now because we need to be able to understand that well that the problem is valid. There is a problem, and people have done it. And what kind of solutions people have found, before we move on to do our own research. Now, it's very important, especially for PhD and MOHD, MOHD students. It's very important to look at the current issue or research problem and compare it with the previous studies, so that we can establish the gap, the gap that exists between the current problem and the past studies. What is yet to be found, or what is yet to be done, or what is yet to be carried out, in terms of the research problem. And based on that gap that you have found, you can explain the rationale or the need of conducting this study. Okay, so that's how we identify a problem statement, and start writing our problems. I think problem statement is quite important. It's usually quite challenging to prepare, but don't worry. It's a normal process. You have to carry out the process with the help of your supervisor. So if your supervisor keep on telling you that your problem statement is not clear, don't worry. Refine it until you've got a very clear problem statement. Okay, so from the problem statement, then you will have your research questions. So remember, background, they are all related. They are all interconnected. You have the background of the study. You have the problem statement, and from the problem statement, you will have your objectives and your research questions. Okay, so let's look at how this look at how we can create the we transform the research problem into objectives and research questions. For instance, our research area is on youth suicide. That's the research area. Our research topic is on factors associated with the incidence of youth suicide. And our general research question would be, the relationship between family background factors and the incidence of youth suicide. What is the relationship between school experience factors and the incidence of youth suicide? That is the general research question. And your specific research question could be, what is the relationship between family income? You see, this is how we narrow down. We keep on narrowing down. First, we talk about family background factors. Then we narrow it down to, okay, what family background factors I'm talking about? Oh, okay, family income is one of family background factors. What is the relationship between parental breakup and incidence of youth suicide? So another issue on family background would be parental breakup. But again, these are some of, well, these examples may look quite simple, but they have gone through quite a long process, quite a long and challenging process, and they would have gone through certain literature review. You look at theories, models, and so on and so forth. Then a lot of things would have contributed to you arriving to this kind of research questions. Okay, so it may look quite simple, but it's not actually. It has a long process. Well, I'm not going to talk so much about this. Do I need a hypothesis or do I not need a hypothesis? So you can test whether you need hypothesis or not. The classic hypothetical deductive model. Hypotheses have an important function in research, okay? Especially when they can be deduced from a theory, okay? Or when they are explained by a theory, so that the research in testing the hypothesis is really testing the theory behind the hypothesis. So basically, if the hypothesis is actually deduced from a theory, then you know that you need a hypothesis. Okay, and usually we come up with a hypothesis because we want to test the theory behind that hypothesis. So that's why you have the hypothesis. Remember, hypothesis is testing. The hypothesis is the function of a hypothesis is to test. To test what? To test the theory itself, actually. The theory says this, so you want to test whether it's true or not, right? So, for example, yeah, if you have come up with research questions, you want to find out whether you need to use or you need to develop a hypothesis or not, look at your research question. Okay? Look at your research questions. Can you predict what you are likely to find just by looking at your research question? Right? If you can predict, okay, then look at whether it is based on certain theory or not. For example, if you look at if you look at this, yeah, this is just question. What is the relationship between family income and the incidence of youth suicide? Okay, if you look at this, you ask yourself, this is the research question, you ask yourself whether you can predict what you are likely to find. Of course, you can predict. Yeah? If you look at this, you can actually predict the kind of relationship between family income and the incidence of youth. Someone may predict the higher the family income is, the lower the incidence of youth suicide is. One can predict that way. Or someone else may predict the opposite way. The higher the family income, the higher the incidence of youth suicide. There is a prediction. And the prediction is based on some kind of theory, of course, in some kind of theory. So therefore, we know that we need to have that hypothesis, because there is a prediction of what can be found, and the prediction would be definitely based on certain theory that will help us to explain why the result of the hypothesis is that way. So it's a very simple a test on whether you need to use hypothesis or not. So that's why when we want to do a research, we need to understand the problem first, and then we develop the problem statement, and then we develop the objective of the research, then we develop the question or research questions, then only we decide whether it has to be a quantitative or a qualitative research. Okay, and then we have the hypothesis. Right? So if you don't know what the problem is, you don't have the proper objectives or the proper research questions, then you wouldn't know what kind of research design you want to use, or whether you need to have hypotheses or not. Okay, so that's very important to remember. Okay, so the next part in chapter 1 that you need to put in your project paper would be the significance of the study. So significance of the study is to tell people why this study is important, why you need to carry out this study. So what you can do is you just go back and look at your problem statement, look at what kind of problems you're trying to solve, who are involved, who would benefit from the study. So write down. So you will write on the significance of the study to these people. For example, usually what we will do is we will start with general. For example, to the government, for example, if that is what your study will do. To the ministry, to the state education department, to the district education office, for example, to schools, to teachers. You narrow down from general to specific contribution. So this is how you identify the significance of the study. Again, very simple. Look back at the problem statement. What's the problem? What are you trying to solve? Who are involved? And who will be benefited? Who will get the benefit from your study? So work based on that to write your significance of the study. Scope and limitation in chapter 1, when you write your project paper, you also need to have this section where you talk about the scope and limitation of the study. Remember, again, especially when you're doing project paper, MOHD project paper, you have a lot of scope and limitation. You limit your research to you localize your research to a certain locality. That is also scope limitation. The population that would be involved, for a MOHD project, don't try to do a research that involves the whole Malaysia, please. For MOHD project paper, no need. You don't need that. It's a very localized study. You can do it, in one district, or that's it. Okay, remember, people, MOHD project paper is worth 6 or 8 credit hours only. Okay, and you have 1 semester, at the most 2 semesters. That's it. Less than 20,000 words. So remember all these things, all these facts when you want to do your project paper. Don't think like you are doing a PhD or a Mode A. Okay, so remember, this is Mode C project paper. All right, theoretical framework is where you provide a particular lens or perspective. In simpler terms, here you want to tell people what are the theories that underpin your research. That's all. Okay, meaning your research is based on what theory. That is what theoretical framework is all about. So if you have two or three, two variables or whatnot, so you may use certain theories. For example, remember I said in my earlier example, I say Maslow theory, for example. Let's say you're using Maslow theory. So that would be your theoretical framework. You will have that in your theoretical framework. Okay? How that particular theory contribute to this research, or how that particular theory becomes the basis of your research. All right? The other one is conceptual framework. So conceptual framework, although it is related to theoretical framework also, but conceptual framework is basically talking about the roadmap of your research. So that's why sometimes in some countries, they combine theoretical and conceptual framework together. They have the theories and the concept together. But in our case, we don't combine, we separate them. But they are interrelated. So when you talk about theoretical framework, you focus on the theories. But when you talk about the conceptual framework, your concern is more on the variables that are involved in your research and how they are interrelated in your research. So that is conceptual framework, where people can see from your conceptual framework, people can understand the relationship between the different variables of your research. This is what we call the researcher's map. So by doing that, we can see that this is influenced by this, this is governed by this. That conceptual framework will be able to help you, to help people understand the relationship between or among the variables. I'm giving you this explanation so that you get some idea of what theoretical framework and conceptual framework are, so that it's easy for you to understand when you discuss this with your supervisor or your lecturer. Okay. The next section that you need to have in chapter 1 of your project paper is the operational definition. Remember, operational definition is not glossary. Yeah, it's not glossary. It's called operational definition because you want to operationalize the terms that you use in your research. So operational definition is referring to usually, remember, it's not dictionary definition, yeah? It's referring to, for example, the variables that you have used in your research. So these variables need to be defined because it may mean differently in your research compared to other research. Okay, for example, just an example, in your research, you have the word school teachers. Okay, school teachers. If you talk about definition of school teachers or teachers in general, it has a huge meaning. Okay, but for the purpose of your research, teachers here may refer to only secondary school teachers or only primary school teachers, or maybe only novice teachers, beginners teachers, what? So that is what we mean by operational definition. You want to give meaning to the term that you use in this research because that is what it means in your research. Okay, so that's what operational definition is all about. Definisi operasi ni bukan definisi kamus. It's you want to operationalize the term that is being used in your research. Okay, right. And of course, finally, you have the chapter summary. the summary of chapter 1 of your project paper. All right. Now, in the summary of the chapter, it's very simple. You just in one paragraph, just explain what have been discussed in that chapter. That's it. And then in the last sentence of that summary, the last sentence, you can have a sentence that link to chapter 2. Okay, for example, in your summary chapter, in the chapter summary of chapter 1, let's say, this chapter has discussed blah 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 blah, and then the last sentence in that paragraph, that summary paragraph, the last sentence will be something like, the next chapter will show us the theories that have been used, or the theories that underpin this research. For example, just to link, I always advise my students to do this, just to link chapter 1 to chapter 2 in your project paper, to make it smooth, coherent. So please have that link, or transition sentence. Okay. Now, okay, does the significance of the study and purpose of study the same? Well, the purpose of the study can be written in one short paragraph. What is the purpose, or in one or two sentences? Yeah? What is the purpose of the study? So the purpose of the study would be a very general purpose before you have the objective. Yeah, Sujana? Purpose of the study is a general statement. Okay, under that purpose of the study, you have 3 specific objectives, for example, and then 3 specific research questions, and then followed by, I don't know, 3 hypotheses, for example. So the purpose of the study is, for example, the purpose of the study is to identify the relationship. You can take back the title of your research. You can use that to be the purpose of the study. So the purpose of the study is to identify the relationship between blah, 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 blah. You can use your title of the research, transform that into purpose of the study. So that's the purpose of the study. After you have written that, then you will go with the objective. Specifically, this research intends to achieve the following objectives. Objective 1, objective 2, objective 3, and then research questions. What are research questions? Research questions are the research objective turned into questions. That's all. So research objective is the statement. Research question is in the form of question. That's it. Same wording. Okay, let me repeat. Yeah? So the purpose of the study is general, which you can take back from your title. Okay, take it. Look at your title of the research. Turn that into purpose. The purpose of the study is to identify the relationship between blah 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 and blah blah blah. Specifically, it tries to achieve the following objectives. Okay, 1, this, 2, this, 3, this, and then with specific research questions 1, 2, 3, and then the hypothesis, if there's any. Now, significance of the study is to tell people why it is important to do the study. It is important, number 1, because it can help the Ministry of Education to make informed decision about blah blah blah. Okay, that is a significance of the study to the Ministry of Education. Significance of the study to who else? Teachers. What could be the significance? Okay. Okay. Another question from Sujana also. Does it mean that operational definition is solely depend on the researcher on how we want to explain? No. Not depending on the researcher. Yeah, it depends on the research. Okay. It's not. It's not the way you put it, Sujana. It's not how we want to explain the terms used in our research. No. it's based on the research. Okay, our operational definition is actually depending on our research, what our research is about. Okay, for example, if the research is on youth suicide, let's say youth suicide, that is our topic. We need to define what do we mean by youth here. Okay, but if you look at dictionary, of course you can get definition of youth in the dictionary. But in your research, youth here may be talking about only those who live in rural areas only. Okay, so you want to explain that, okay, the youth here does not cover all the youth. The youth here, the term or the variable that I'm talking about here is based on research done, which conclude that youth, the research is, because the research is focusing on urban youth, so the youth here is referring to urban youth. I hope you all of you don't get me wrong. It's not like the operational definition is like how I want to define it. It's not like that. It's not how I want to define it. No. Is what it means in this research. Okay? Students, if you look at students, there is a definition in the dictionary. Yes, if you go to the dictionary, there is a definition. But that is definition given by a dictionary, which is general. But in your research, for example, your research is only focusing on secondary schools students whose age is between 13 to 16, let's say. So in your research, the word student is defined as students who are aged between blah, 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 blah. Okay? Right. So if I would like to conduct research on lifestyle, but mainly about food intake and stress, so I only define lifestyle focus. Yeah, something like that. Yeah. So because you want to tell people that you need to understand the term here that I'm using here is might be slightly different from what is being used elsewhere. Okay? So don't worry. Look at some examples of research that people have done on how they come up with operational definition. Okay? You want to operationalize the term, usually the variables lah. You want to operationalize the term or the variables in the context of your research. Okay, right. Okay, right. Yusna, okay, sorry if off topic. Can I ask about procedure of submitting the project paper? No, this is not off topic. This is still relevant to our discussion because we are talking about project paper. Right. Usually, once you have completed your project paper and your supervisor has approved your project paper, meaning your supervisor is happy that you can submit your project paper, depending on your faculty, usually you can just submit to the supervisor, or you can submit it to your faculty administration office. So that's how it is done usually, Husna. Husna? Yeah, okay. It doesn't go through IPS. For MOHD project paper, it doesn't go through IPS. It goes through supervisor and faculty. Right. So let's look at, I don't want to look at, we have discussed chapter 2 just now. So let's go to, let's talk about chapter 3 of your project paper. So so in chapter 3, what you will do is, now remember, yeah, chapter 2 just now, I've discussed, you can arrange your chapter 2 chronologically or thematically. Chronologically meaning you start with um, historic, it could be historically oldest to the newest. But usually what we'll do in chapter 2 is we will start with a concept first. Okay, in chapter 2 you will start with concept first. The theories, you know, but begin with concept. If for example my topic is on leadership just now, so I will start with concept of leadership. What is leadership? But remember, it has to be a bit focused, yeah, not too general, because remember, you don't have enough space and time to discuss this unless you're doing PhD. Then you have to cover quite a lot actually. But if you're doing your project paper, you need to start narrowing down even when you want to talk about the concept. So what is briefly talk about what is leadership, what types of leadership you have, you know, and then focus on, let's say you're doing instructional leadership, so focus on instructional leadership. And then theories, what are the theories that will underpin your research? The question that students usually ask would be, do I need to cover all the theories? It depends. Especially if you're doing PhD, Mode A, EDD, of course you need to cover as much ground as possible because you want to show that you really understand about the concept itself, about leadership itself, because that is PhD or Mode A. But for project paper, you don't have to cover everything in detail. You can give an overview. Okay, you can give an overview, but not in detail of all the theories. But give an overview of the theories, but focus on the theories that you are going to use in your research and why they are relevant in your project. Right? Okay. What's the question? Does it mean it is enough for our proposal to be our chapter 1 to 3 or do we need to extend further? You may need to extend it a bit after collecting data, because sometimes, especially if you're doing qualitative, especially when you collect data, then you find something else, and you realize that you did not discuss that in your chapter 2. So you may need to go back to chapter 2 and add a bit. But usually, it is enough. Again, I'm talking about project paper, yeah? I'm talking about Mode C. It should be enough. If there is any extension that is needed, it would be very little, right? But of course, listen to the advice of your supervisor on whether you need to top up your chapter 2 or not. But like I said, the simple rule is give an overview. Okay, give an overview of the theories, but focus on the theories that you will be using. So you start with concept, theories, then you go to the past studies. Now, this is another question that students sometimes ask. You know, there is a trend where students write past research in Malaysia, past research internationally. I don't think there is a need to separate between, there need to be a separation in terms of section. This is talking about international literature, this is talking about local. I don't think there is a need. What you can do is, you can discuss thematically, okay? Thematically, meaning when you talk about the general introduction just now, or the concept and the theory, you can go by chronology. That part you can go by chronology, meaning if you want to talk about the concept of leadership, you can start with the earliest concept and then how it developed and how it become like what it is now. Chronology, no problem. But when it comes to studies, maybe you will need to break them into themes. What themes are we talking about? The themes would be perhaps based on your variables. Okay, so you will have one on family background, I don't know, depending on your variable. And within that variable, you will have subtopic. And this is where you report past research that has been carried out regarding the variable. You see, you must understand these two things. Yeah, one is talking about the concept, the theories, and whatnot. The other one is talking about application. Past studies is actually application. So application of the theories, what people have done so far, and what you found. So that will be in the second part of your chapter 2, where you discuss the variables and the findings of the research based on the variables. And even when you're discussing these variables, so you have thematic, you arrange them thematically, but the discussion within that variables can be chronologically, meaning you can start with earlier findings, because the earlier findings is very significant, maybe you want to put that, and what happens now in the last 5 years, for example. Let's say you're doing multiple intelligences. Your study is regarding multiple intelligences. So people have done a lot of research on multiple intelligences, Gardner's theory, yeah? Gardner's model of multiple intelligences. So what happens is, what you can do is, you may talk about the findings, the earlier findings of research done on multiple intelligences, and how it differs from the findings that you have in the last 5 or 10 years. That is possible. That is a mixture of chronological arrangement and thematic arrangement. So I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. Yeah? You can have both in your discussion of your chapter 2. Now in chapter 3, of course, you will have this. Again, this is just a guideline. Eh? So these are the things that you may have in your chapter 3. Of course, the introduction to chapter 3, you describe what you are going to have in chapter 3. And then you go to your research design, what research design you have used. And then you will have discussion on what is your population and what is your sampling, or what is your sample. Or if you're doing a qualitative research, you will talk about who are your participants, what are your subjects, and what are your cases, and so on and so forth. And in doing this discussion, it is always wise to refer back to the WH questions, so the what, who, why, when, where, how, and so on and so forth. And then there will be a section where you talk about your instrument, the instrument that you use to collect data. We talked about instrument just now. If it is an adaptation of somebody's research, please mention the adaptation. If you have made some adaptation, which I don't encourage, but if, let's say, you have, please explain as well how the adaptation has been made and why it has been made and what process it has gone through. Because when you want to make adaptation, there is a process that you have to go through. Right? And then if there is a pilot study that has to be carried out, then report this pilot study in your chapter 3. Why the pilot study was done, what is it, where, how, who, and so on and so forth. And in chapter 3 also, you need to come up with a description of how the data will be collected or how the data have been collected, data collection procedures. Yeah? You need to explain clearly on the procedures, on the process. And then you have one section where you talk about the data analysis technique, meaning what kind of data analysis you will be using in analyzing your data that you have gathered. So those are the things that generally you will have to include in your chapter 3. Okay, I'm going to skip this. I'm just going to skip all this. I'm going to go straight to, well, because you are doing mode C, this is not something that you will want to include so much in your project paper. This is just for your knowledge, which later when you get this slide, you can just go through, yeah. But this is more for mode A and PhD, especially. They need to be able to understand this very, very thoroughly. But for project paper, it's fine. But of course, you will have to understand between quantitative and qualitative, no matter what mode you're doing, mode C, mode B, mode A, or PhD, or EDD. This is basic differences that you have to understand. What is quantitative research? What is qualitative research? So that when you write your chapter 3, your research method chapter, you are clear about which design you're actually following and why you call it qualitative and why you call it quantitative. Okay, so there's this basic differences you should know. Right. Now let's go to population and sampling. When we talk about sampling, of course we have population first, then we have sampling. But when we talk about sampling, population is, the population itself, and the target population. But sampling would be people who would be involved in data collection. So that is sampling. So from whom will the data be collected? You need to explain. Or who or what will be studied. Now, you cannot study everyone, everywhere, doing everything. This is talking about population. You cannot study the population. You need a sample from the population to understand the population. So that's why for quantitative research, for example, the sampling that you want to use has to be, sometimes it will be probabilistic. Okay, if representativeness is very important, meaning you want it to represent the whole population. Okay, and it can be purposive as well. But of course, there are various kinds of sampling technique that you can use. Now, I noticed a question just now: what is the sample size of a pilot? It depends on which book you refer to, but the most common is minimum of 30, okay, for your pilot sample. Okay, a sample for your pilot study, minimum would be 30. Okay, that's what usually we will use. Right. So how can we do our sampling? In chapter 3, you need to explain what kind of sampling technique you have used. Whether it's simple random sampling, systematic sampling, stratified sampling, what kind of sampling have you used? Now, please make sure that you have read you have understood the sampling technique before you put them in chapter 3, because each of these sampling technique has its purpose, has its reasons why it has to be used that way, and has its own way of its own technique of doing it. Yeah. So if you are talking about simple random sampling, then we will ask you, how do you pick randomly? You cannot simply mention it is simple random sampling. But how do you randomly choose your sample? Is it by putting all the names in a jar and you just pick one name one after another, or what? Okay, so make sure that you are clear about the
the sampling technique that you want to use. Now, if you're talking about sample size, again, depending on what book you're referring to, now you have population. Okay, how do you determine the size of your sample? Of course, the most common way of determining the sample size would be using the Craigie-Morgan method or the Craigie-Morgan table. The Craigie and Morgan have come up with, of course, they have a formula, and they have come up with a table where you can use that table to identify the size of your sample by looking at the size of your population. So in the table, it is written there, okay, if the size of your population is X, this number, the size of your sample is Y, this number. So it's very easy, right? So make sure you understand how to calculate sample size. But of course, you don't need to do the calculation because we already have tables prepared by various researchers. And like I said, the most common that people use would be Craigie and Morgan. Yeah. Okay. So if you're doing qualitative research, then of course there are many kinds of sampling technique that you can use. Again, depending on what you are trying to achieve, what questions are you trying to answer? Whether you're talking about if let's say you want to have samples that have the same characteristic, so you may use homogeneous sampling, for example, and there is a reason why you're using this. There is a purpose, right? So you have to understand this and put it in your chapter 3 when you talk about sampling. Okay. Data collection instrument. Now, of course, again, in your chapter 3, you have to explain the data collection instrument that you will use to collect your data. And for quantitative research, of course, the data collection instrument usually is a standardized kind of instrument, whereby you have survey questionnaires, or you have a standardized measuring instruments, or some kind of other instrument that is standardized. Now that is compulsory if you are doing quantitative research. The instrument must be a standardized instrument. Okay. Of course, you need to explain this instrument, in your chapter 3. If let's say I'm assuming because we are doing a project paper, so we are going to use existing instrument. So explain. Okay, in the section where you talk about instrument, please explain, give a brief description of the history of the instrument, when it was developed, by whom, and if it has gone through a process of adaptation, explain the process of the adaptation, by whom, when, where, in what research, and so on and so forth. And then talk about how this has been used in various research. Okay, and how many components does it have? Does it have different domains in the instrument? So you have to explain the psychometric characteristics. You have to explain it has 4 sections. Each section A has 13 items. It is using Likert scale. You will have to explain all this in your instrument section of chapter 3. All right. Okay. So, however, if you're doing qualitative research, then the instrument is different, because the instrument is you, the researcher, because you are going to observe, you are going to interview, you will be writing, So the research instrument in qualitative is different, it's you. But of course, you will need to use certain things to help you gather the information. So for example, you will have interview protocols, for example. Yeah. You will have to use observation checklists, for example. So if you are doing qualitative research and you're using this, of course, you will have to explain, for example, interview protocol. How do you develop the interview protocol? Interview protocol means the questions that you want to ask in your interview, yeah? So that's called interview protocol in qualitative research. So you need to explain why you have 6 questions, for example. This question will be addressing which research question, and so on and so forth. You have to explain the instrument that you're using. Right. And of course, in order for you to make sure that you are using the right instrument, and the instrument that you're using will help you to measure whatever you're supposed to measure. Therefore, you need to do certain tests. So this is the main reason why we have pilot study or pilot tests. The reason why we have pilot tests is because we want to somehow validate our instrument, to see that the instrument is the instrument that we have chosen is correct, is suitable for the data that we want to collect. Okay, so the same with qualitative research. You still need to do pilot, where you will use the interview protocol, the interview questionnaire that you have come up with certain people, to see whether the questions will help you answer or get the information that you want to get, how long the question will take, whether there are any questions that will mislead your participants, and so on and so forth. So, of course, you will also need to explain this findings of the pilot study or pilot test in chapter 3. Okay, of course, I'm sure everybody knows what is reliability, what is credibility. Yeah? So, yeah, you will need to do this when you do your pilot test. Okay, so you need to get the result and report the result in your chapter 3 under instrument. Now, then you will have the data collection procedure section. In your project paper, chapter 3, you will discuss how just now you talk about the instrument. Okay, the next part is how you are going to use the instrument to collect the data. So meaning you will have to explain the process of data collection. For example, who will be administering the questionnaire, the survey questionnaire? Are you going to administer the questionnaire yourself? Are you going to use third-party research assistants? And before you start collecting the data, what are the procedures that you have followed? For example, do you need to get permission? In order to collect data, have you got the permission? And the process of data collection from the beginning, before you go and collect data, that is pre-data collection. Okay, after you have collected, you go and collect the data. How you gather the data? You give the questionnaire, let's say, to your samples. How do you get back the instrument or the questionnaire? You have to report all of that. Okay. Right. So explain this. Like I've mentioned just now, yeah? Explain this. How it is going to be done, who will be involved, and so on and so forth. Of course, these are some of the data collection methods for qualitative research. Again, you have to Just now we were talking about quantitative mainly, but in qualitative, if let's say you are using these methods, you will have to explain the use of these methods and how they are going to be used, how long will it take, and so on and so forth. Okay. If you are doing qualitative research, you may also need to study documents, whereby you may need to study the photos, videos, diaries, manuals, memos, and so on and so forth. So you have to explain also how you study these documents, what kind of documents have you studied for the research, right? Now, once you have talked about how you have collected the data, then you go to the next section of chapter 3, where you talk about how the data will be analyzed. So if you have usually we would discuss data analysis based on the research questions or research objectives or hypotheses, because each research question may require you to use different kind of analysis. Okay, so you will have to explain what kind of data analysis that you are going to use. For example, if you are doing quantitative research, whether you're going to use descriptive statistics, why are you using descriptive statistics? Whether you're using correlational statistics, why are you using correlational statistics? You see, they are all going to be realigned with your objective, research questions, and hypotheses. Okay, the same with qualitative research. If let's say you're doing qualitative research, what kind of data analysis you are going to use? Are you going to use grounded theory analysis? Are you going to use thematic analysis, and so on and so forth? And how you are going to conduct those kind of analysis, right? Of course, at the end of chapter 3, before you go to the conclusion, okay, at the end of chapter 3, I always advise my students to come up with a summary table. Okay, a summary table. And this summary table will have on the left, the first column, okay, first column, you will have your research objective. Okay, second column, you will have your research questions. Third column, you will have your hypothesis, if you have any hypothesis. Fourth column, you will have your data analysis. Okay, so by doing this, by having this table, you have summarized what data collection and data analysis that you will use for what or for which research questions or research objective or research hypothesis. So it will help the reader to have a summary of your research objective, research questions, research hypothesis, data analysis, that's data collection and data analysis. That will help a lot, the reader to understand your research design. Okay, and then of course you go to your conclusion or summary section where you summarize what you have written in your chapter 3. Okay, let's see. Okay, question. Okay, so Lutfi, I've answered your question. Yeah, Lutfi, how many sample size? Nick Nazlan, Prof, is it correct that before you conduct an interview or pilot study related to human, you need to yes, you need to get approval from Research Ethics Committee. That is correct. There is a procedure of doing this. I'm sure all of you are aware of this. You have to fill in the form. Yeah. Yeah. So the answer to that question is yes. You have to go through ethics committee. Yeah. I hope I've answered the question. So I'm just reminding everybody that you need to make sure that you discuss this with your supervisor. Yeah. Regarding ethic research ethic committees research ethic committee's approval. Okay. Okay. Right. So let's go to chapter 4 now. Okay. Okay, now let's go back to chapter 4. Now, how do you prepare your chapter 4 of the project paper? Now, it's quite simple actually. In writing chapter 4, what you have to do is you should go back to your chapter 1. Okay, you should go back to your chapter 1 because when you write your chapter 4, you must follow the objectives and research questions and the hypothesis of your research. That is available in chapter 1. All right. So we always advise students to try and arrange the discussion or the reporting of findings in chapter 4 so that it is structured based on what your objectives and research questions are. That would be more structured. Okay, so what you can do is, of course, chapter 4, you will start with your introduction to the chapter. All right, and then start by discussing a bit on the purpose of your research. Very, very brief. Okay, so the purpose of this research is to do this, to find these objectives, research questions, and hypotheses. All right, just briefly. Okay, that will take about 1 page or 1.5 pages. That's it. Why? Because you want to refresh the reader's memory what this study is all about and what you're trying to achieve. Okay, so you have introduction, and then you have the purpose of this study is to do what? Done. Then you go to the findings. So the first finding that you want to report would be, for example, let's say if you're doing quantitative research, okay, the same with qualitative research actually. The first findings that you want to report would be the demographic findings. Okay, start with the demographic findings, both qualitative and quantitative, because you need to explain, for example, in the qualitative research, you need to explain who are involved, who are they. Okay, how many people are there who participated in your research, who are they, gender, male, female, whatever. Demographic, report that first. The same with quantitative research. Demographic, report that first, because in your in your survey questionnaire, you will have this section where you record their gender, their working experience, their whatever demographic information that you have. So report that first. So provide information on the demographic information that you've got. Okay, give findings on the demographic information with both text and also a graphic. Okay, graphs, charts, and whatnot. Combine both. Okay, make sure you describe or make sure you explain this. You provide this information about demography. You're done with that, then only you go to the next section where you start with the first objective. Okay, if the first objective or the first research questions have various subsection, then you have subsection. Then you go to the next objective or research question. Similar, apply similar things. Report what you saw. Okay, report the findings. Okay, report the findings. Once you're done with objective and research questions, then you go to your hypothesis. Testing of hypothesis. All right. So you have the hypothesis. and then provide the result. Okay, you need to put the table, the output table of your analysis, so that we can see the result and see whether your conclusion is correct or not. So you have put your hypothesis, you've put the result, and you give your response to the result of the hypothesis, whether it is the hypothesis is accepted or rejected, and so on and so forth. All right. Once you are done with all this, you have a summary of chapter 4. That's it. You finish chapter 4. Okay. Then you go to chapter 5, where you have a discussion. Okay. This is where you discuss what you have found in chapter 4. So again, the discussion must follow the presentation that you have made in chapter 4. Okay, the discussion in chapter 5 must follow the flow of the findings that you report in chapter 4. Right? So because you start with demography, so you have to discuss demography if there is a need. And after that, demography, because you start with research objective 1. So discuss that in your chapter 5. So when you discuss in chapter 5, this is where you have to revisit your literature review. And this is where maybe you will need to read a bit more, because you found something and you need to support whatever you want to argue with literature review, and you realize that you did not do that in chapter 2. Fine. Find some materials, put that in chapter 5. But of course, always remember, when you do your discussion in chapter 5, again, you are supposed to be critical. Okay, you need to be critical. Critical discussion of the findings, because you don't want to simply describe. You don't want to simply describe what you have found. You want to have a discussion of what you have found. So make sure you do that. And when doing this, you will have to compare with past studies and so on and so forth. Okay, so that is chapter 5. Repeat research objective 2, research objective 3, and research hypothesis if there are any. All right. So that is basically how you prepare your project paper, right? And remember, some people ask about the number of references that you need to include in your project paper. Well, it's very difficult to answer, although we have a guideline. We have a guideline, like 30 for mode C, 50 for mode B. We have a guideline on that, but it's just a guideline. Of course, you may need to read more depending on the topic of research that you're doing. So it's very difficult for me to say, okay, if you read 30 books or 30 materials, for mode C, that is enough. What I'm trying to say is, you will have to decide. My advice is it has to be more. Yeah, it has to be more. But you have to decide whether you have read enough or not to discuss a project which carries 6 to 8 credit hours for your in the research. Okay, so